look back at Chapter 2, I can't help but see a jumbled mess of ideas. And that is shown in full force in Chapter 2 Season 6, or Season 16 as I'll be calling it. I've made it very clear that I like Fortnite and have made at least one video on it every week for almost a year now, so I think my opinion is valid at this point. And Season 16 was... well, it was alright. The theme this time around was primal, bringing new biomes, weapons, and mini-events which can't be understated really. The game really did change this season. Let's start with the weapons. I hate them. Now, that may sound a bit extreme, and honestly it probably is, but I can't sit here and say I enjoyed the mess that is the base loot pool. We got crafting, and to go with that, we have new makeshift and primal weapons, which on paper is a fun mechanic, but in practice turns looting into a grind not too dissimilar to that of an MMORPG. I've spent more time this season smashing up cars and spraying down animals than anything else, and I don't think that's a fun thing to be doing. And I spent 8 hours non-stop fishing last season. The makeshift weapons were far too weak and, with the slight exception of the shotgun, were completely useless past the initial looting period. Primal weapons are fine, but the lower damage and lack of first shot accuracy that normal weapons have made them less ideal, with one exception again being the SMG, which was probably the best spray and pray weapon of the season, all things considered. So that makes 3 different weapon types for each category: makeshift, primal, and normal weapons, referred to as mechanical in this instance. But then we had the wild weeks, and other additions to the loot pool. Now, I'm not someone to complain about content, but when the only content were singular weeks worth of fan favourite weapons, quote unquote, and we didn't even see things like the minigun, it becomes questionable. And I'll admit, I'm a huge fan of the dual pistols. They're my favourite weapon, give or take, within the game, and the buff that they received this season was amazing. But overall, this loot pool was a mess, even when they reintroduced the tack midway through the season. I don't want to ever see this loot ever again, quite honestly. I like the crafting mechanic. I think that's actually a really good thing to have. But how they've done it this season is just not right. Now, with the loot pool out of the way, I think it's only right to talk about the map changes. Yeah, all 3 of them. So the biggest change came to the centre, as every single map change in this chapter has come down to. And you know what? The Spire's fine. I'm not huge on it, and honestly, I barely landed there other than for challenges. It's not the best loot spot, and it also doesn't really give you that many options for actually getting away from it to other loot locations. But it's fine. And honestly, the combination of the Spire Guardian and then later Raz, it made it an interesting spot, and I wouldn't really complain about it. The other major change that was noticeable was actually directly connected to it, and it was the other spires, or the other towers, or whatever you want to call them, and then the biome change that connected them all. Essentially, we had a dead grass biome. That's what I'm going to call it. It's just orange grass. That is the only difference, other than the fact that some things that were bushes and stuff like that turned to rock, and we got a bunch of bones. I'm not even exaggerating with how basic the changes actually were. It may look very different on the map, and going through it may feel very different because of the colour change, but this is basically just an autumn reskin of the regular map, with just a few minor alterations to what specifically is in those areas. And I don't really think that that's that interesting. Everything that I said about the main spire in the centre applies to the smaller towers, except for the fact that they were actually more useful location overall. I landed at the smaller towers pretty regularly because they were consistent loot drops, as well as the fact that you could easily do some damage on any number of players from those lookout posts. It made a lot of sense to land there, and I just can't say the same about the Spire. And realistically, that's all the major changes. Sure, there were minor changes to odd little structures dotted around the map, but we see that every season regardless, and I don't really think it's that worth going into, because realistically, it didn't matter. The only other major changes were the fact that the Colosseum became colossal crops, which was a redundant change in my opinion, and really only made a difference within the final few weeks when all the crops became crop circles. And if that was the entire intent, honestly, just give us back a farm location. That's all they had to do. Otherwise, we had salty turn to bony burbs. I can't say I really cared either way. It kind of merged with Tilted Towers a little bit, and that's nice, that's cool, but I don't care. And honestly, I still ended up landing at Catty Corner and Pleasant Park and Holly Hedges more often than not, because they are very reliable spots for me. I like the locations, I know the loot locations for them, the chest spawns, and genuinely I just don't care enough about these minor alterations to existing POIs to actually spend time there. So that's the map and the weapons. Let's talk about the mechanics that changed. So I've already kind of gone over crafting, so I'm not going to really touch on that. But the major part of the crafting system was 2 changes to vehicles, and then the addition of animals, I suppose. Essentially, we got a brand new hunting mechanic, which intended you to kill chickens, and wolves, and raptors. Oh boy. So, the 4 animals, as I say, were chickens, raptors, hogs, wolves, and yeah, they're not that interesting. They're kind of dead content, as a lot of people have said throughout this season. Especially when it comes to the raptors, which are nothing but just an excuse for Fortnite to give us a way to die easily. Because they are impossible to tame, because they usually spawn in groups of 3. They do about half of your health bar per hit. If you don't have shield especially, you are not going to survive. And generally, they're kind of useless. Sure, they drop the crafting materials and the new white heals, which are meat, but I don't care. And honestly, the only way that I would have actually cared at all would be if the raptors were rideable, which is what we all expected initially. But no, taming them does the same thing as taming any of the other animals, except for the chickens, which I will get to, where they just kind of follow you, attack structures, regardless of who built them, and potentially bite or headbutt or whatever else an enemy, though the chances of that are so low that I don't actually think I've ever managed to do it. And then there's the chicken. The chicken actually gave us a different mechanic. You can pick it up, and if you jump, you hover, or float, or flutter, whatever you want to call it. It's a movement item in the most basic sense. And that's kind of sad. In combination with things like impulses, impulse bows, even things like the towers and zip lines, it can actually be a useful tool for getting around the map, but realistically, I only ever use the chicken whenever I needed to do it for a challenge, and yeah, that's not really the ideal way to have a new mechanic added. And then there's the changes to the cars, which basically boils down to there's a new consumable, which essentially allows you to make any vehicle into what a lot of people would call a monster truck. I'd just call it an off-road vehicle. It's a big wheel, it makes it bouncy, you can drive on any surface without losing speed, which is very useful because especially something like the Whiplash, which is the fastest car in the game. It's kind of useless if you don't drive on the roads, and this season, thanks to the biome changes, lost a lot of actual road and just changed it for dirt path, which does have a different texture for driving on. It made it really unreasonable to use the Whiplash, even though it was the best car, especially if you wanted to use the Rocket League Whiplash, which is definitively, especially with the new wheels, it's the best car. It's faster than any other vehicle, it's more fuel efficient, and generally it's just the best car in the game. But that was it for cars. We got a change to the mechanic bays that go next to all the petrol stations, but even that was more of just an excuse to show off that you could do the tyres. The cars kind of had no purpose in this season, and it just adds more credence to the fact that Raptors should have been rideable, or we should have got something like horses or something, because the theme does not match the fact that we got car upgrades. And it's kind of weird that Epic even thought that that would work this season. And finally, that brings me on to the topic of skins. Now, I've made it very clear I care about skins a lot in Fortnite, but even I have my limits. This season, we saw a lot of repeated theming and a lot of reskins, which is fine in a general sense, but at the same time, it's not ideal. Especially when a lot of these things are coming out very close to each other. Now, I will admit, there were some really fun additions. Diamond Hands is one that comes to mind, which was one of the first, if not the first, meme items in general we've ever had. And that was a pretty cool thing. It was for April Fools, and you know what? It goes pretty well with a lot of different combos, and it's actually part of the 30-day rotation, so I can't really complain. What I can complain about is the fact that this entire season has been taken over, once again, by a brand. And unlike last season, which was mixed with a bunch of different properties and different brands and all kinds of things, this one was very heavily based on one, that being DC, Detective Comics, and it does make a lot of sense. There is currently a Batman Fortnite 0 Point comic that is ongoing, and it will be ongoing for the first few weeks of the next season as well, so I'm sure it will continue. But the Battle Pass had a DC skin, that being Rebirth Raven, and then we saw 4 other DC skins release within this season. It by no means brings us to the totals that we've seen for things like Star Wars and Marvel, but it's still a lot to see so quickly, especially when a lot of these skins were repeats or re-releases of skins we already had or characters we already had. And realistically, most of what I have to say about the skins this season is just that we got a lot of DC items that were kind of redundant, including the fact that, as of recording this, we already know of 2 different Batman skins for this promotion alone to add to the 2 we already had before. That's too many of the same character, my guy. We don't even have that many of, I was about to say Spider-Man, we don't even have a Spider-Man, so I can't even use that analogy. It's kind of a ridiculous state that we're in right now, with DC especially, but generally this season has been all over the place in terms of its quality control, and I can only look at it as potentially Epic are running out of ideas, which is unfortunate as someone who covers the item shop every single day, or at least tries to, and just generally enjoys the skins in Fortnite. I don't think they did very well this season, even with the skins that I did like. And realistically, I can't even remember most of the characters that we had this season. I could probably stretch to give you the names of the Battle Pass skins, but honestly, beyond Tirana, Lara Croft, and Raven, I don't even care about any of the skins in the Battle Pass. And yet I still did grind out to 225 to get all of their exclusive styles. I think it's fair to say that FOMO really hit me hard this season. But that's really all I have to say about this season. I think it was fine, but it wasn't very good. Especially coming off last season, which I really did enjoy. This season just felt empty. And not just content-wise, but also just in terms of that general Fortnite character. There wasn't really an overarching theme throughout this season. And in fact, a lot of the changes that happened weren't even related to the primal theme that the entire season was named after. It really just confuses me. But in any case, that is going to be it for this video, so I hope you liked it. Like it if you did, and subscribe if you're new around here. Tell me what you think of this season. Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Do you think the skins are a bit underwhelming, as I do? Tell me in the comments below, or tweet me at rabbitwithaxe on Twitter. I'll try and reply to as many comments as possible. No promises, though. But yeah, this season, it's been fine. And so is this video. So thanks for watching. Goodbye. That was the wrong order. Yeah. Bye.
Lunar rainbow flag, happy pride, rabbit with axe. Streamer, let's play. They them out like dinosaurs. FNAFN, troll. Not the leader of a cult. Rabbit with axe. It's Lunar.